I just want to say thanks for coming tonight and joining us to talk a little bit about landscaping and lighting for Kolob Estates. My name is Paul Koschel. I'm the Director of Public Works with the city. Here tonight, we're joined by several of our Public Works staff, as well as our consultant team, which is NBS and Mike. We do have a couple of presentations for you that our staff will run through, but we are by design leaving a lot of this meeting, which we're scheduled for an hour, available for question and answers. So it'll be about 15, 20 minutes maybe of the presentation, and then as much time as we need to go through all of your questions. So with that, I'll just go ahead and pass the mic off, and thanks again for coming.
Great, thank you. We have been having a little bit of an issue with the mics, so please bear with us tonight. So I just wanted to say, like Paul mentioned, we will have a presentation. We are going to have a lot of time for questions, so we ask while doing the presentation just to hold off questions for now, and you will be able to ask after the presentation, because we all know that the question may be answered in the presentation. So one thing that I do want to mention is we have a lot of experts here today. We have a lot of people from the city. So we do ask during the question and answer portion of the presentation that we do stick to questions. I know a lot of us have comments. If you do have a comment, there are some note cards around the tables, and if you don't have any on your table, I can bring them to you. If you have a comment that you really the city and us to read, we definitely you can definitely write that down, and we will read them all. That being said, thank you again for being here today. Civic engagement is so important, and we know that there is a lot of information going on in your community. And that being said, we will start.
Thank you, Michelle. Hi, everybody. My name is Chris. I'm with the Department of Public Works as well. I oversee the landscaping and lighting districts for the last about 3 years or so. So I'll go ahead and give you just a high-level overview of the existing district, a high-level overview of the proposed budgets, and then we'll pass it off to Sarah from NBS. Oh, you have a clicker. All right. All right. So the Kolob Estates LLMD was established in 1989. There was some new development in the area, so to take care of the landscaping in the area, this district was formed. The district currently maintains landscaping and lighting on portions of Waterman Boulevard, Oliver Road, lighting and irrigation on the interior streets, and various open spaces throughout the district. So the district currently has a max annual assessment rate of $400 per parcel per year. And in 1999, Kolob was among several districts for which the city initiated a Prop 218 vote to increase those assessment rates, but unfortunately that ballot did fail at that time. I'm not going to go over this entire slide. There's a lot of information on here, but this will be available at civicmike.com/Fairfield. Civic Mike is our community engagement consultant, helping us through this process. So on this slide here, you see that the district currently receives about $55,000 in overall revenue every year, and expenses on that in the second portion have been just at or just right over that same amount. So we've had to dip into fund balance, I think, a couple times. Okay, that's exactly what fund balance is there for any unexpected expenditures. It's like a savings account. Unfortunately, we know that that's not a sustainable funding source to be able to support ongoing operations. As with all goods and services across the board, the cost for landscaping is also increasing. We've had a couple of landscape providers that have been providing services in the city of Fairfield for the last couple of decades. There's been 2 primary ones, and what we're hearing from them is they just can't continue to provide services at these same lower costs because it just doesn't make financial sense for them at this point. They're not able to pay their employees or purchase supplies and make a profit, and they are a business, right? We also have other providers throughout the city that we're hearing the same message from. We're also hearing the same message from our counterparts in other cities as well. So just generally speaking, all costs are going up. In fiscal year 2021, we had some staff turnover here in Public Works, myself included, and I was hired on, and we started taking a look at the projections and where we would be, 4, 5, 6 years out. And what we found with these anticipated cost increases is that by the fiscal year 24-25, this district would actually face about a $10,000 deficit in fiscal year 24-25, and from there it just kind of keeps going. So at the time we discovered this impending shortfall, what we did is we took immediate action. One of those steps was to hire NBS, our consultant, who you'll be hearing from in just a little bit, to help us figure out how we can form a new district to generate new funding for the Kolob area. She'll talk about why we're forming a new district and the rules behind that as well. This slide was the budget for the proposed district. Again, I'm not going to go through every line item here, but what I wanted to point out is that while there are increased assessments included in this budget, there's also a $24,000 general fund contribution that's going to be included in this budget. And let me go back one slide. The general fund was providing about a $1,000 contribution in the existing district, so that's going up quite a bit. There's also going to be about $1,800.
I'm going to just switch out your mic really quick and see
Thank
if this
you.
one works better.
Thank you. There's also going to be adequate funding to open up opportunities for more bids from other quality landscapers. As I mentioned, we do have two primary providers that have been city in the last couple decades. We had, the city as a whole, had a policy where we only could accept lowest bids from all landscape providers, but in 2020 we changed that policy. Now we can select landscapers based on their qualifications, and so by generating funding in this district, we're going to be opening ourselves up to be able to accept bids from other landscapers who might want to do business here in the city. And the last thing this budget will allow us to do is still continue to build on the contingency and reserve line. We never had a dedicated budget line item for that, so this budget will collect money to address capital replacements or address unexpected expenditures from year to year. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that this budget, the maximum budget and the maximum assessments that we can collect each year. So while, you know, in the first couple of years, we'll probably be collecting at the max just to make sure we're building up reserves. But as a result, level, start seeing maybe irrigation doesn't cost just what we anticipated, you'll start to see a decrease, and we'll only collect what we need each year. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass it to Sarah from MBS.
So this is the agenda for my portion of the presentation. We'll talk about a number of things. My name is Sarah Mears. I'm a director with NBS. NBS is a consulting firm that works on land secured financing districts, which is what this is for cities and other local government agencies throughout the state of California. And I have been with the firm and practicing in this area for just over 20 years. So we're going to talk about a handful of things. Tonight, we'll talk about the methodology. We'll need to discuss special and general benefit. We'll define those terms, tell you what those are, tell you how we calculate that. We'll talk about the improvements. In your district, you have both street lighting and street trees and landscaping, so we'll look at those. We will talk about the budget and how the assessments are calculated, so we'll look at that cost estimate in a little bit more detail and show you how we calculate the assessment rates. And from there, we'll talk about the formation process, which includes the council actions and the ballot proceeding. So in terms of the methodology, I'll start by saying that this is an assessment district. Assessment districts are governed by Article 13D of California's Constitution. I won't make you raise your hand and tell me if you voted yes or no on Proposition 218 in 1996, because that is the initiative that put Article 13D into the Constitution and gave us the rules that we must live by today. So of course 1996 was after your original assessment district was created, so we are now operating under a new set of rules than the existing district can operate under. So that's why we have to form a new district as opposed to just increase the assessments. We now have to come into compliance. If we're collecting any additional money from the assessment, we now have to be in compliance with that Proposition 218 or Article 13D of the Constitution. That requires that we follow this methodology. We have to identify the improvements that are going to be maintained. We have to determine the maintenance cost estimate. We have to identify the parcels that benefit from the improvements. We have to separate general and special benefit. We'll talk a little bit more about what those things are. We have to allocate the proportional special benefit to parcels in the district. And then we have to calculate the assessments that are levied to each parcel. So we'll walk through that. So this is a map of your district. You can see the green area kind of around the outside there is where the landscaping and trees are. And it might be a little hard to see on the screen with the light, but you actually have street lights. Those little dots on those roads there are all of the street lights. So you have 23 street lights, 151 street trees, and approximately 96,000 square feet of landscaping that's being maintained in your neighborhood. So we talked about methodology, and I mentioned general and special benefit. So one of the things that we're required to do under the provisions of Proposition 218 is to identify the special benefit that is conferred to property in the assessment district by these improvements. And we have to separate that from the general benefit. So each of the types of improvements that you have confer special benefits to property in the district. For the street lighting, that provides improved safety and increased accessibility to the property. And your street trees and landscaping provide improved aesthetics and increased livability to the property. So those are the way that those parcels, your parcels in the district, benefit from these improvements. We then take that special benefit amount and allocate that proportionately to each parcel. In order to do that, we look at a variety of factors. We look at land use, building size, lot size, and the average daily trip information, so that we can compare each land use within the district to each parcel to all of the other parcels in the district. And then the general benefit, so we talked about that special benefit, that's benefit that is conferred to parcels in the district. General benefit is benefit that is conferred to the general public. So for example, if someone were to drive through your neighborhood and they were passing by the street lighting at night, the landscaping, what have you, they would be benefiting from those improvements because they're there. And that's considered general benefit. So we're using pass-through traffic as the way to calculate the share of cost that is relative to that general benefit. So we're looking at, and I know these are a little hard to see on the screen, these are tables from that engineer's report that is in front of you, if we want to focus in on some of those. But we're looking at the streetlights and where those streetlights are located. In this case, they're all on interior streets. So that pass-through traffic is roughly 2%. For the landscaping, we're looking at the location of the landscaping, and we're looking at particularly the larger roads, which is Oliver and Waterman. And we're looking, those are bigger roads, they're not that local street, so we're looking at pass-through traffic on those roadways. And that is about 49% for each of those. And so then we're looking at the share of the landscaping that is on those streets versus local streets and what have you. And that's how we're calculating that general benefit. So Chris mentioned the total share of cost that is being borne by the city, and the general fund contribution is about 25% of the total budget. So here's the budget for the district. It is about $123,000 a year for all of the services, so that includes the lighting and the landscaping. And so that gives you just a little bit more detail. Chris mentioned that there's some reserve being collected and so forth. Right now, the district, and this will continue to happen, the budget is set annually for the assessment district. So that is a process by which the city council is involved, and annual engineer's report is approved by council. And at that time, the budget is set each year. So if that contingency and reserve bucket gets filled up, and there's no need to collect additional contingency, then the budget for the year would be less than what it would otherwise be right now. We need to collect those funds. So we take that budget, we take away that general benefit component, because that cannot be assessed to property owners. Again, that's that general benefit contribution paid for by the city. The part that's left over is the $98,000, $98,616, and we take that dollar amount and allocate that to the parcels in the district. As I mentioned, we look at a variety of factors. We're looking at land use, building size, lot size, and average daily trips to relate the parcels to each other. We use a point system to do that, and we take that total budget divided by the total points in the district to come up with the rate per benefit point, multiply that rate per benefit point times the number of points assigned to each parcel, and that's how we calculate the assessment amount. So there are two land use types in this district. Of course, it's primarily single-family residential, but there is a undeveloped parcel. On average, for the single-family residential parcels, the dollar amount is $764. If you haven't looked yet, you can see on civicmike.com the last 2 years of assessment that have been charged to your property under the existing district, and you can see the exact amount that is proposed to be charged to your parcel under the new district. So as I mentioned, things like your lot size and building size and so forth will play into that. So this is an average of all of those. One other thing I wanted to mention is that had the district, the existing district, included an inflator from the get-go from 1989, right? The assessment amount on average for single family would have been $852. So it's actually coming in at slightly less than what your assessment would have been had there been an annual escalator applied from 1980 to now. In terms of the process, Proposition 218 also provides us with an approval process. This is not something that the city can impose upon property owners. There is an approval that must occur, which is called a protest ballot proceeding. This is not a vote of registered voters. It is not like your typical ballot where you vote for mayor or president or whatever. This is a different process, and property owners only have the right to submit an assessment ballot. That assessment ballot is weighted according to the financial obligation of each parcel. So if my assessment is $100 and Chris's assessment is $200, her ballot will be weighted or worth twice as much as mine. So whatever your assessment amount is, you can kind of think of it as $1 per, a vote per dollar, essentially. So if you pay twice as much, your ballot will be worth twice as much as someone else. Oh. One more point here. When we tabulate the ballots, we tabulate only those ballots returned, and we will add up the dollar amount of the assessments that cast their ballot in opposition, and we add up the dollar amount of those ballots that are cast in favor. If the amount in opposition is greater than the amount in favor, we have a majority protest and cannot move forward. If the opposite is true, if the dollar amount in favor is greater than the amount in opposition, then the city council will have the opportunity to consider the resolution to form the district. In terms of timing, we're looking at April 18th. That's the city council meeting where the resolution initiating proceedings, resolution of intention to form, including approval of the preliminary engineer's report, would be considered by council. From there, ballots will be mailed out. Those assessment ballots that I just mentioned would be mailed. They are, the public hearing date is June 6th. Ballots must be returned prior to the close of the public hearing on June 6th. And then those ballots will be tabulated on June 7th, and there will be a special council meeting to announce the results of the ballot tabulation. And with that, we are at the end of the presentation, and I will hand it back over to Michelle before we begin the question and answers.
4 questions, but I guess the one that I'll ask you is, what do you anticipate in terms of services being curtailed if this doesn't pass?
The question was, what services would be cut if the new district is not approved, basically? So the answer to that is, well, we don't know specifically what will be cut because we'd have to speak with the landscaper, let them know how much money we have, and ask them what types of services they could provide for the amount of money we have available to us. I just wanted to give you an idea. Water services were about $25,000 over the last couple years. The district currently only brings in about $50,000. So the $25,000 for water, about $10,000 for annual administration. You have the $15,000 left for landscaping services. We're anticipating landscaping services to be around, let me see this budget here, it's in the engineer's report. Landscaping maintenance alone, about $40,000. What we want to do for this district, as we're doing for all of our landscaping districts, or trying to move towards, is putting everybody on a regular full-service tree pruning schedule to where the trees will be taken care of, not just walkway clearances and not just pruning as needed, but about every 3 years to get those trees properly pruned and taken care of. So that's also included in the budget. So I guess, short answer, we don't know exactly, but we have an idea based off the irrigation.
We're talking about the tree pruning on Oliver and Waterman because the interior is not covered by our district. That's done by the city budget.
That's correct, yes.
So it seems to me likely, or it would be more reasonable, to cut the landscaping on Waterman and Oliver rather than cut the water or cut anything more vital, because actually the interior doesn't get any services against water. We fix the valves or pipes if there's leaks. But other than that, the interior doesn't really derive that much service from the trees that we have.
Great, thank you. And then Chris, can you just touch on the city council decision on creating a committee or?
Sure.
Yeah.
So recently, the city council approved a citywide landscaping committee who will oversee and sort of provide input on landscaping throughout the entire city. So LLMDs will obviously be a part of that discussion, and in that discussion, especially if the district doesn't pass, we're going to go ahead and talk about how we want to move forward with all landscaping throughout the city, whether we want to move towards drought-tolerant plants, the specific areas of the landscaping that we should probably pay more attention to or prioritize our funds to. I think that, of course, since LLMDs have very specific funding and they're being paid for by the property owners, of course, your guys' vote, whether or not you choose to be on that landscape committee, applications will be taken around July timeframe, so be on the lookout for that. But whether or not you choose to be on that committee, because you guys are in this district, because you guys are paying the assessments, we want to hear from you on which direction you want to go with your landscaping, whether or not this district passes.
Thank you.
I have a question about voting. It's an A and B part, if that's allowed. Per household, can you hear me? Okay. Per household, is it 1 vote per home, or if there's 2 homeowners, if it's co-owned by 2 people, is it 2 votes then? How does that work? And then my other question, I don't know if you want to answer that one first.
Yeah, I'll answer that one first. So it is the property owner has the right to cast the ballot. So if it's a couple that has joint tenants in common, or whatever the proper term is there, there is 1 ballot that comes to the property owners. And if you disagree, if you would like to cast your ballot separately or differently than the other person that owns property with you, then you could request what's called a proportional ballot. If you own the property 50-50 and one of you casts your ballot in favor and one casts the ballot in opposition, you essentially cancel each other out. But it is just 1 ballot to the property owner, unless there is a request for a proportional ballot. So again, not voters, not individual owners, but it's 1 ballot for each parcel.
And then along that same line, we were in a meeting a couple of weeks ago with Paul, And it was brought up that the city has a vote if there's city property involved.
If there's
and-
public property,
Yeah, so I
correct.
didn't know and Paul wasn't sure at that point if we did have,
This district does not have any public property.
okay.
We just did the other meeting we did earlier in the evening, and certainly the other districts that we've worked with, many of those do have public property, in which case those public properties are being assessed. That is yet another provision of Proposition 218. And so in addition to the general benefit contribution, the city is actually contributing assessment, or other public agencies would be contributing assessment for property they own in the district. It just so happens that there's no public property in this district.
Okay, thank you.
You. First question, what is the cost of this assessment compared with other assessments in Fairfield?
So the cost is really specific to each district because it
Yeah,
depends
well,
on
we
what,
pay about 400, correct?
it depends on what
Are we
services
the
you
highest or
have.
the
So,
lowest of this Fairfield?
well, so it's not an apples to apples comparison because there are some districts that have street lighting and landscaping. Some districts only have landscaping. There is a
I get
very
it. You
wide
don't answer the
variety.
question, so let me continue. Obviously, this was ill-conceived, not well-conceived at all. Very few homes, very few, right? And then we have to pay for a district that is, you know, I'm looking at it right now. This was pressure from the builders and contractors to build here. They came up with the idea, let's charge $400, and the city approved, and they went on. That's the only reason. There was no reason whatsoever. There's the cost and what needs to be done, there is no nexus at all to it. And you know that this is the highest in Fairfield, correct?
It's not an apples to apples comparison
Well,
in
it is
terms of
apples to
the,
apples. You know,
the
why is it
different
not?
improvements
Why
are
is it
being
not?
maintained. Did you have another question?
I have another question. You talked about $25,000 in watering, or whatever it is. We had a meeting about this about 15 years ago. And I brought to the attention of the people that they were watering during the wintertime, watering when it was raining, watering when it was not needed, because no one cares, right? We're going to pay for it, and no one wants to hear about it. They say that's not true. Well, everybody here says, yes, yes, yes. You see, looks like the city doesn't want to hear us. Not then and not now. I have another question. It's on the ballot. The city council?
Say your question one more time. I didn't catch it.
Who, there's going to be a ballot, right?
Correct. There's a ballot.
Approved by the city council?
No, the ballot goes to the property owners in the
Yeah,
district.
but when is the process of approving it? Is it on
April 18th.
April 18th?
April 18th is where the
Okay,
city
well, I
council
guess-
will first
I guess everyone is
consider
invited on April 18th to come to the city council meeting and tell them what
the
they,
first.
what they really want.
First council meeting will be on
Yeah.
April
I have
18th.
was fair.
Then the public hearing where you would need to and the date by which you need to return your assessment ballot is June 6th.
Hi, my question would be, when the maintenance district was formed, my first part of the question is, how many actual homes do we have in our district? And,
I think it's 120-ish.
okay, and then
129.
the second part of my question would be, is that why do we have a district that's so small when we're looking at this, so few homes that have to support this large of a maintenance district? Other maintenance districts, Rancho Solano and other ones, where they have hundreds and hundreds of homes to pay for those things. And we've got this square of 120 some odd homeowners that have to pick up the burden, what it includes Oliver and Waterman, and we're expected to pick that up with so few homes. How did that happen? I'm curious.
So I think someone mentioned it earlier that a lot of these districts are developer-driven. So how are we going to take care of landscape? That's the question the developer asks. How are we going to take care of landscaping? Either they have an HOA or they have a landscaping district. And this is just the way this developer chose to go. And as it is right now, the city has moved towards a policy of all new development will be supported by either an HOA or some sort of district in place. It will no longer be a burden on the general fund. But in terms of why this district is so small, unfortunately, I don't have any documentation as to why it wasn't extended. I don't know if the homes around this district were already in place, and that's why, they decided not to include the existing homes that were there. So we could take a look into our records to see if it's documented anywhere, but I doubt that there'll be an explanation as to why this particular lot of land was chosen.
The other part of my question on that is that in the beginning when they created this, I remember there were some legal objections brought up to city council and from the homeowners around the area, Burbank, because that was Fairfield's first custom homes. I remember the legal action is that they had said that they were told that this area was going to be a green belt that would never be built on. And one of the things I haven't ever been able to figure out is that when they did this, I live on Russell Court, and a portion of my backyard was taken up for a maintenance strip that ran along those homes on Burbank. There were redwood trees put in there, irrigation. There's also, I think, a 30-foot that runs off of Gillespie in the back, and that was created back there with trees and irrigation, all of which was to appease those homeowners because they were told this was a greenbelt area. And so for the last 30-some years, my wife and I have been paying part of our maintenance district fees have gone to maintaining those strips. I've never been able to find out what, how much of the maintenance district that included when that was something that was almost like a political or a legal thing that was done between the city of Fairfield and those homeowners. So I, as a homeowner in that maintenance district, I'm paying for that. The same thing goes as our hill or our open space, that was open to anyone in the city that wanted to walk up there, but we paid for its maintenance. We went through years of fires and crime and all kinds of stuff up there, but one of the things, again, I've never been able to find out what the cost of maintaining these strips were to us. I've never been able to, in the last couple of months asking questions, is how much is our maintenance district paying for the hill or the open space? In the beginning, it was only to be fire breaks that went around the outer edge, the outer perimeter. Due to crime prevention, and for Harry Price had demanded that the city go ahead and do a complete mowing of the hill, but the complete mowing of the hill was never to be able to charge to the maintenance district. That was Harry Price, the mayor, and that was the city of Fairfield was going to pick that up. I haven't been able to figure out, I haven't been able to get that answer either. Are we in fact paying for that full maintenance of that hill now?
No. No, only the sections in green there is what's being funded by the LLMD. So that, yeah. The open space is being maintained with additional funding, yeah.
Thank you. And I am going to try to analyze this gentleman's questions as well. So he mentioned that the sprinklers go on during the winter. Can we maybe talk about the app to let people know, and then maybe talk a little bit about why sometimes they run? I know we've answered that question in previous meetings.
Sure, so I'll go ahead and answer the question about the app, or even on our city website. So on the city website, we have a place where you can go to report any issues, whether they're street lights or potholes or landscaping issues. So if you go to the City of Fairfield website, at the top you'll see a tab that's called How Do I? If you click on that, there'll be a drop-down menu that opens up, and there's something that says report an issue or report a problem or something like that. When you click on that link, it'll take you to a page where you can choose from various issues and then fill out the form, the appropriate form, to get that to the correct department to be able to take care of that issue. We also have an app called My Fairfield CA. So if you want to use your cell phone, or maybe you're out and about and you see something that you'd like the city to address, go ahead and pull up that app, take a picture even, attach it to that report, and somebody from our operations team will get back to you and make sure they take care of that issue. So I'm going to ask someone from our operations team to talk about the sprinklers during the winter time and how often those are checked, and what type of oversight we have on those, please.
Good evening. Yes, the irrigation does run throughout the winter. The valves should be actuated at least once or twice a week, or the diaphragms within the valves will actually fail and need to be replaced, and the replacement is costly. So the sprinkler should not be on for very long, no different than your front yard. It should be a quick 1-minute cycle. That's not always the case. And unfortunately, we have been tasked with work with contractors. Again, these are the low bid contractors. It's not what it is moving forward. Over the last year, since the thing Chris mentioned, the council allowed us to now go with the best value or a performance-based contractor. But when you're going with the low bid contractor, you're literally getting the bottom of the industry. And ideally, like with our front or backyards, we're going to go out there if we know it's raining, and we're going to adjust the timers accordingly. And that's forcing a contractor to do that. You're paying literally nothing. I mean, not enough for them to hardly get by. It's incredibly difficult. But we do our due diligence. We do have in-house staff that we try to get on site to adjust sprinklers when they can, when we can't get the contractors to react. But if you report it either to 428-7300, which is our corporation yard, or through the My Fairfield app, we've been pretty good about staying on top of the complaints as they come in. Unfortunately, when people do call in, sometimes they call the wrong department. Calls may not get transferred over to us, but we've got a pretty good track record in Public Works operations following up with requests over water wasting issues. We don't want to waste water any more than anybody else. So we definitely encourage you, when you see something out of adjustment or something that's on, you question when it should be on, give us a call. The My Fairfield app is extremely effective in getting to us, and our response time is generally no more, unless it's an emergency, it's 2 working days at the very most for when we get the call. If we get it at 10 o'clock on a Monday, you're going to hear from us generally by Tuesday afternoon, but at the very latest to be Wednesday, unless it's an urgent issue, in which case you should call non-emergency dispatch or emergency dispatch, depending on what it is.
The app, the website, and we can also put those numbers will be on civicmike.com. So, as well as all the slides, and the engineer's report is also on civicmike.com. Just so you know that. Yeah, so we can go. So does anybody? Let's see if anybody new has a question. Then we'll come back around. So we have one here. And then we'll come back to you after this.
I'm just talking about the price that they're saying they're gonna, like for mine, it was $400, now it's gonna go up to $700. Why do neighbors have to be different? Because it should be all the same price, like, because they're not, if they were doing my yard only and I pay $700, it's okay, but why should, someone else across the street have a lower price than I do?
Proposition 218 is the short answer to that question. So this is, again, I mentioned this is an assessment under state law. And an assessment is different from a tax, is also different from a fee. Those are all different things with very different definitions under state law. This is this assessment has to be based not on cost of providing service, not on a reasonable methodology. It has to be based on the benefit received, the proportional special benefit conferred by the improvements to each individual parcel. And so we take guidance as we create the methodology to allocate that special benefit proportionately to each individual parcel. Again, Proposition 218 does not tell us how to do that. It doesn't give us a prescription and say, you calculate the proportional special benefit by this methodology. So we take guidance from various court cases that have been decided over the years related to assessment districts that have been formed and challenged so that we understand how to calculate the proportional special benefit. And so this methodology that we have developed, wherein we are looking at the land use, the lot size, the building size, the average daily trips associated with each land use, all of that information and that methodology, the way that that has been developed is all based on the guidance that we see in multiple court cases, et cetera, around assessment districts and how benefit is conferred to property.
Sir, so when you use confer, I see some eyebrows squint. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Yeah, so these are those special benefits we talked about. So special benefit is, you can use the term, conferred is the term that's in Prop 218, so that's why I keep using it. But so special benefit, these are the benefits that the parcels that are around these improvements receive, right? So you have street lighting. I think the map is still up. So, you know, the street lights are right there on those local streets. The landscaping is right there, you know, surrounding the subdivision. And so those parcels, all of the parcels within the boundary of that district receive those special benefits.
So we have one, and then we'll go back to Michael.
Okay, back to my last question is that when I asked about the hill, I think several people had said, well, no, we're not paying for any of that. What I don't understand is that here on page 9, it talks about the general location, the improvements to the district are described as follows. It has number 5 is all lands owned by the city of Fairfield designated as open space, including fire breaks. That tells me that that's part of the district that I pay for. Is it not? This is, I mean, I've never got it answered, is how much does it cost our maintenance district for that hill?
It's not included. It's an eligible expense, but it's not included currently.
Okay,
and it
I'm just
hasn't been
going off what it
included.
says here.
Yeah.
The
It also
document you
allows
gave
us
me.
to take care of those the fire breaks on the open space areas. So it's loosely defined, but that's, I guess, so that we, in the future, if we need to, be able to take care of those fire breaks that are in the open space areas, we can do that. Actually, I think we're doing that right now. We are taking care of the fire breaks in the open space areas. So it's an eligible expense, but it's not actually being expensed to the district.
Thank you.
I would follow up. I was told by Gary Ginsler, is Gary here? No. That we pay for the culvert to be cleaned, but everything else regarding the open space, the city takes care of, separate from our assessment. So what I wanted to say in regards to the last comment was, we beautify our own properties. We're actually being penalized. We take care of the curbs, and we plant trees, and we take care of everything. So in a sense, the more beautification that we do for our properties, the more benefit is assessed to us, and therefore our property assessment would be higher. Because the city, you know, again, doesn't do anything for the interior except supply water and take care of the plumbing, the irrigation.
The other personal properties.
Right, so the landscape strips, it's so that the interior irrigation is provided and included in the assessment district, but that landscaping is not, right? So if
Right.
you're planting things, that's your
It's one of the
responsibility.
factors you mentioned in assessing the amount of money each homeowner pays. One is the benefit that the landscaping gives to the homeowner. But we give ourselves the benefit.
Oh, this landscaping that you see in green here.
In green.
Not the interior landscaping that
Oh,
you're
I see.
providing yourselves.
And so one other thing, so that the Oliver and Waterman seems to be completely paid by our LLMD. The west side of Oliver, the people that live across the street aren't paying for any of this maintenance in Oliver, and the people living on the north side of Waterman aren't paying either, correct?
Correct, but that's where that general benefit calculation comes in. So we're looking at that pass-through traffic. So we've calculated the number of trips that, based on the average daily trip information, and I'll get the page number for you in the engineer's report on this piece of it, so you can see. I know that's a little hard to see up on the screen there, but we're looking at the average daily trips associated with the parcels within the district. We're looking at the travel demand model for those streets to see what the traffic capacity is on those roadways, specifically Oliver and Waterman, and we are calculating there how much pass-through traffic. So again, those trips that are not associated with parcels in the district, we're calculating that pass-through, and it is 49% roughly. And so that's how we're calculating that general benefit contribution that comes out to, thank you for enlarging that. So this is just the landscaping improvements. So we're looking at that 49% pass-through, and that's how we're getting to the overall general benefit calculation, which is where the city is contributing to the costs of the maintenance, not just property owners that receive that special benefit.
Thank you. So we'll have, okay, we'll do 1, 2, and then 3. And then if we can just remember, please, let's leave it to questions. If you have a comment, we can definitely talk offline.
Okay, I guess my question would be, as being an original homeowner for the district, is that I'm assuming that when the district was started, that the planning division, Public Works, that they're the ones that came up with it was going to be $400. That's what they decided at that time would be the annual assessment for each one of the homeowners in our maintenance district. And my question is, being one of the original homeowners and dealing for the last 30 years with almost little to nothing done in the interior of my district, how are you assuring me that by doing a 78% increase to me as the taxpayer, what better benefit am I getting? What's changing for me, the taxpayer, the homeowner in that maintenance district, where for $400 a year for the last 30 years, I've literally seen nothing, that I've taken care of that mowing strip forever, because nothing was ever done with it. The trees are dying. The trees hadn't been taken care of. We, the homeowners, have done tree trimming and so forth. But what assurance is there that when I'm going to do a 78% increase in my taxes, I'm going to open up to a possible 3% increase per year? How does that change what I'm seeing in the interior of my district?
So in terms of the landscaping work that's being done, or the areas that are being maintained, there is no additional area being maintained, meaning the interior, the tree lawns, or those little strips, those will not be added to this district. So the responsibility for those areas, other than that irrigation, would still be by the homeowners. The issue really is the cost of providing the landscaping services in particular has increased significantly over that time, where the assessment revenue has remained flat.
So that maintenance is mostly on Waterman and Oliver.
Correct. Those areas in green on the map are where the landscape, the street trees and landscaping are.
And you're asking for a 78% increase for each one of us.
So it varies per parcel. As I mentioned, each parcel has a different assessment based on those factors that I mentioned. Again, if that roughly $400 would have been increased by CPI from 1989 to now, the rate per parcel would actually be $852, and on average, we're sitting at just around $700 for a single-family residential parcel under the proposed assessment.
And to follow up with that, the idea here is to maintain the current level of services that you have. We're not proposing any new services. We're saying if we don't want to see any degradation in the landscaping that's currently there, if we want to be able to keep the water running, and if we want to be able to keep the lights on, this is the proposed budget that we have for you. But what I also want to point out is we're not asking for this to be passed. We're saying if the residents, if the property owners would like to continue these services, this is what it would cost, and this is the assessment amount that we would need to charge in order to provide those services. Everyone here and every property owner in the district will get that ballot and have the opportunity to reject this proposal, and that's perfectly fine for us as well. So this is just the proposal, so you guys know what it would cost, and you have an opportunity to approve that or not.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. I'm also one of the originals, 32 years in this district. So, and I have about, 10 feet in front of my house, that's about it, of plants that I've planted with my neighbor, and I was even willing to water it, Now, it's obviously, this is the entry to Rancho Solano on both sides. I propose to you, this is an improvement not to us, but to the city of Fairfield. The city of Fairfield should be the ones to take the extra cost, if there is such thing as an extra cost. Not even it is. So, like my neighbor said, we're going to pay 70% more or 80%, whatever it is, but I know this, it'll be $1,600 for me very shortly. I have a bigger lot because I paid for it. I used to have a view that I paid for. Everything that we have we paid for. Fair and square at the beginning, plus $400, which is the highest fee in Fairfield. And that should stay. That's the compromise that we had, that the developers did, and why you now wanted to change that? I don't get it. That's my question. Why are you doing it?
Just for clarification, if we're talking about by dollar amount, the Kolob district does not have the highest dollar amount assessment per parcel in the city of Fairfield. So I just wanted to make sure I put that on record. But I think the way to, I don't have that off the top of my head. Okay. So, yeah, you could look at anybody's assessment on the website if you'd like to.
You get this, you go to the app to turn the water off at 11 o'clock at night. I mean, those kinds of answers, you know, those are just whitewashing what we're talking about.
So the idea for this landscaping on Waterman and Hillborn, as you are correct, everybody who lives in Rancho Solano would likely travel down Waterman to get to their subdivision, and that's incorporated in the general benefit calculation that Sarah had mentioned earlier. But the other way to think of this is this landscaping wouldn't be here if if the Kolob development wasn't there in the first place. That would probably just be a lot of dirt, right? It would just be a undeveloped lot with just a bunch of dirt and no landscaping to take care of. And so the idea of why the landscaping is there, it was specifically for this development. Why the decisions were made to make the district so small, I'm not sure. But you know, essentially, I guess that's the way you could think of it. It was made specifically for this development 30 plus, or however many years ago. Yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
Just a question on the budget. There's $8,000 for engineering. Is that a recurring cost every year, the $8,000? And the engineering report that was generated for this year costs a lot more than that, I believe.
Yes.
So, and that was added into our costs. So I'm not sure if there's an engineering report necessary every year, or how does it?
Yeah.
And so why was our particular one this year so much higher?
So I'll answer one, and then maybe you want to answer part of that. So yes, the $8,000 built into the proposed budget does include annual administration services to revise the existing engineer's report that we created this time. And when I say revise, I mean it's because the consultants, what they'll be doing is going through each parcel, making sure there's no land use changes, making sure nobody added on or reduced maybe their building square footage, making sure no parcels split or merged, so that we can make sure we charge the correct assessment according to the methodology outlined here in this report. So yes, this initial report that we developed, or excuse me, that NBS developed, did cost quite a bit more. It was about $50,000 to create this engineer's report. Also to do the balloting process. And there's a lot of work that goes behind that, and that's where I'll go ahead and pass it off to Sarah.
Yeah, and just real quickly, I did want to start by saying there is an annual process. So I talked about that a little bit, that there is a budget that's set annually. There is an annual engineer's report that comes to council every year with a series of resolutions. So that does occur. And you'll notice that the administrative budget there includes time for city staff, but this is also a charge that's billed on your property tax bill. And the County of Solano charges the city to include the amount on the property tax bill. So you see that there as well. So then in terms of the process here, the work that we've done in terms of identifying all of the improvements and reviewing all of the parcels in the assessment district and so forth, the whole methodology that I described earlier, that's a process that we went through that resulted in this engineer's report. And of course, the remaining parts of the process are the ballot proceeding and series of resolutions that go to council. So that's all encompassed in the amount that was for this year, because that is, we won't have a ballot proceeding next year because, assuming this is approved, then that's the new amount, and you just, keep charging it. Someone, I think, mentioned earlier, there is a CPI component incorporated in this, so that, the goal being that you do not you do not end up in the same position again where the costs of providing the service have outpaced the revenue that's coming in. While it is tied to CPI, there is a maximum placed on that of 3%. So the most that the assessment could increase in any given year is 3%. If CPI is greater than that, it's capped at 3%. If CPI is less than that, then you would be at whatever the CPI is that is less than, less than 3%.
What's the ballpark turnout expected to be for these kinds of votes?
Meaning how many ballots would we expect to be returned?
With presidential elections, about 55% of registered voters vote. So for this kind of an election, what is typically seen by the turnout?
It is frankly all over the map. I have had assessment districts with 90% participation. I've had assessment districts with 10% participation. It very much, it varies widely based on the what the assessment is funding, the community as a whole, how information is getting out, that sort of thing. I would say that the typical number that we see is somewhere between 20 and 30% ballots returned, but it's hard to say for sure what that might be. Yeah, so the ballot will be, there'll be a page and there'll be a place for you to check your box in favor or in opposition, and there'll be a place for you to sign your ballot, which I know is also different than the regular voting process. That is, that's part of the ballot proceeding. But once you fill that out, there will be a return envelope included in the package, so you can just mail that back. There's specific language that has to be included on both the outgoing envelope in Proposition 218. I always think it's a little funny, actually specifies what size font we have to use for some of those components, but it's all very, very much spelled out in the law in terms of how that process works. It is a correct. And I don't know if I said this earlier, but if you actually do not receive a single ballot back, then you don't have a majority protest.
I just wanted to follow up on ways you can return your ballot. While you can use the return envelope that's going to be included with the ballot package, you can also return it in person to the city clerk's office there at City Hall at 1000 Webster Street. There's also an opportunity to turn it in at the public hearing. I don't know if you want to wait that till the last minute, but that's an opportunity as well.
They'll come out right after that April 18th meeting. So they will be mailed to you. You could submit it I don't know if you'd be able to have time to submit it that very afternoon, but you could submit it the next day, or you can wait all the way up until the close of the public hearing on June 6th. That is the last opportunity, so you have that window.
And so I clarification. So if you vote yes to this, our assessments could go up to a maximum of 3% per year based on Kolob?
Correct. The assessment rate that would be approved by casting your ballot in favor, assuming that there is no majority protest at the tabulation, the maximum increase is 3%. So it can go up by CPI up to 3%.
And if this is voted down, do you anticipate that this would come up again for another reassessment or another survey where we could vote?
Yes, so
I mean,
theoretically.
how often does this come up? I've only lived here 6 years, but how often do they come up? Not very often.
I don't know on average how often they come up in each community. Theoretically, we could do a Prop 218 vote each year. I wouldn't advise it. It's a very expensive process, as you can see. But, let's say in 5 or 10 years, you guys get together and as a community, you decide, actually, we would like to, you start increasing landscaping, or hey, maybe we want to, I don't know, put landscaping back in our landscape strips, whatever the case may be, or maybe we want to dissolve the district altogether. Maybe we just want to take care of, our own lights. I don't know, how would you, former HOA, whatever it is. There's always an opportunity to do it at a later date, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's an expensive process, so we're hoping that this vote really turns out, there's a lot of participation and that it really reflects what the community wants this time, so we don't have to do it because for lack of participation.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to have more of these meetings, or at least to disseminate this information to the property owners, because we've read what's online, so a lot of these questions were answered. But for a lot of people, they are first learning, and it's a big learning curve. So the more information we get to the community, the better people will be informed, I think.
That's a great
Thank you.
segue
Oh,
to
yeah.
talk about the upcoming community meetings.
Oh,
Follow-up to the question that I asked.
or, sorry, I don't know where we're going.
If there's a surplus, you said that if there's a surplus in money developed, that the fees may go down. Is that something that the engineering report would, okay, that's all.
Yeah, that
Can re-
annual.
Can you repeat the question for the
Yeah,
video?
so the question is if there's a surplus or if there are, additional funds or the budget is less than what might be collected with the maximum assessments, that would all be spelled out in that annual engineer's report each year. And so I think I said this earlier that once the contingency reserve bucket is filled up, that's a portion of the budget that would no longer need to be collected. So that would, sort of come out of the budget, and then assessments would, theoretically be levied at less than the maximum after that bucket is filled. But it did, since we touched on this briefly, and you gave us that really nice segue into the community meetings, we wanted to talk about that for a quick second. So the flyer, I don't know if you guys got one on your way in, but if you didn't, please take one on your way out. The flyer has attached some other information, the Civic Mike website, but on the back side of that, there's an attachment of some upcoming pop-up meetings that the city will have. And so this is going to just be where either myself or someone from Public Works sits at Starbucks or maybe Pete's Coffee. We're going to do one over here at the park, and I forgot what it's called. I'm sorry, the park that's close, Mancus Park. That's upcoming. It's going to be an opportunity for you guys to come up and just have a conversation with us, ask us questions. Maybe, you go home tonight and you're like, oh, I should have asked that. Go ahead and come to one of those pop-up meetings. You can email us, you can call us, our staff, or even civicmike.com, and all that information should be there on the flyer. The meeting schedule is also available online, both at the city website and also the Civic Mike website, if you guys prefer that.
Wasn't this done in 2003?
Okay. Go 1, 2, and then I saw one over.
Wasn't this done in 2003? I think you mentioned that it was, right?
I may have said 1999, and I might have gotten my districts messed up, but it was either 1999 or 2003 that the Prop 218 vote was put, the balloting process.
It didn't pass, right?
And it didn't pass, correct.
Well, why don't we wait another 20 years? It'll be just good for me.
We might do that.
Okay, question is that in our information that we were giving, we're talking about that, we can only afford a Volkswagen, but we want a Mercedes. In your information to us is that it was said that, if this doesn't pass, we don't have enough revenue to continue to pay out the bills that we're doing. Has there been anything looked at as far as we're talking about Waterman and Oliver, as far as like what it would cost to maintain it if that were drought resistant, maintenance free? Like you go over to Vacaville and you see in the Browns Valley area, you see the gravel out there and the succulents and stuff that are out there. They're not going with the green grass and some of the nice things that we have. But has that been looked at all to see what kind of a revenue could be saved if we weren't taking care of all that? If we went to low maintenance?
To my knowledge, there hasn't been any formal study. We have a landscape architect coming out and giving us an idea of what that would cost to both, do that capital replacement project and then also to maintain it thereafter. To my knowledge, there hasn't been a formal study about that. I'm sure we could probably do some form of an evaluation like that without the cost of a landscape architect. It's something we could definitely look into, whether or not.
That would be good for me as a homeowner, and we're talking about, voting on this, because we're saying that, well, if it doesn't pass, we're going to have to reduce your services. Well, like we said, is that
Yeah.
I don't know what would be reduced what's outside my front door. There'd be nothing reduced.
She said there was an election, it failed, and we paid a price. The landscape in front of that, in our neighborhood, went downhill. To me, for a few $100, that was a waste, that was a mistake. And that's what this meeting is about. You want to make a mistake again.
Oh, okay. Well, let's please leave it to questions. I know we had a question over here. But I do want to say that if you do have comments or you do want to talk to us, you can go to civicmike.com/Fairfield or email us at contact@civicmike.com, and we are very, very happy to answer emails. Oh, no. Well, if
to the
you
pop-up.
remember it when you leave, which I'm sure you will once you get in the car, go ahead and email us, and we will be sure to answer that. Thank you.